So again, this is our relational organizing training, if you will. This has been put together by Amanda and Ashley and myself, just so you guys know, and just that way everyone's aware. We are going to be recording this this session, if you will. I know we have a lot of groups outside of Texas that are interested in kind of seeing how we are doing things. That way, they know how to do things, or they can take what we're doing and kind of mold it to their groups. So with this being recorded, this is also going to be able to be replayed at a different, at a later date if need be. It'll be accessible in multiple languages as well as ASL interpretation. So that's something that no other group's doing, that we're kind of leading the pack with, and it's kind of cool. So now with that, let me see if we can get this going here. So the agenda today, our agenda is going to be fairly simple. There is a lot of information that we're going to try to pack into an hour, hour and a half. So make sure you are paying attention. There might be a couple of questions throughout the session where we might ask you to raise your hand. You don't have to physically raise your hand, but on your Zoom platform, if you will, there's a option for you to raise your hand. So we're going to talk about how you can meet Pete and our team. We have some events coming up very soon that we will share with you. Sharing your story, we'll call on maybe one or two people to kind of ask about their experience and why they joined Team Pete. We're going to go over the meat and potatoes of this session today, which is the relational organizing, what relational organizing looks like. How do we use our relational organizational tool that the Team PHQ has developed for us? We're going to go over some volunteer onboarding, how you can get onboarded onto different teams, different groups that we have going on that we're going to be launching, and how you can also onboard your own volunteers, right? So how's that going to look for people coming on board your team? And then next steps, we'll wrap up with some of the next steps on what you guys can do to keep the momentum going, as well as leave time at the end for question and answer. So with that, let's see here. The rules of the road. Who here, by a show of hands, knows or has heard of the rules of the road? In simple, rules of the road: be like Pete. We want to, lean in, commit, bring the whole self. Now, remember that this is going to be a lot of our first time doing things. Some of the organizers we have coming out this everywhere from regional all the way down, well, from state level all the way down to the volunteer level, it's going to be their first time getting involved in a campaign, in volunteering in politics. So we always like to say that we have a beginner's mindset. Like they say, get on the bike. If you fall off, we learn about it, we get back on, and we keep on going. So as long as we can keep a positive beginner's mindset, we'll be in a good space. And then when in public, wave, say hello to people, use your manners, please and thank you. To us, this is going to be like common sense, right? Because this is what we do, right? As Team Pete people, it kind of comes second nature to us. Don't litter, pick up trash that you might see when you're, at the end of a community event, or end of you're tabling out in front of or at a farmer's market, and you're cleaning up your area, and pick up. We don't want to leave anything behind, and we don't want to engage in any antagonistic situations. If anyone engages with you that's aggressive, overly assertive, or any kind of a threatening way, just immediately remove yourself from the situation by walking away. If there's a team lead, with you or whatnot, ask them if they can maybe, address the concern. But if you feel uncomfortable in any way, the main idea over here is making sure that you're safe and you're comfortable, and also not adding fuel to the fire from anybody that might be being aggressive towards us. If that makes sense. So that's kind of what the rules of the road in a big old little nutshell is. Again, we're asking everyone to commit to the rules of the road. Everybody on from the Team PHQ for the Pete for America campaign, all the way down to all the volunteers that we have on board so far, I've committed to the rules of the road and to be like Pete. So we ask everyone here on this call to do that as well. And with that, I know you guys didn't come to hear me speak, so I'm going to pass the baton off to, I believe, Amanda, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I'll get started. So I just wanted to give you just a little bit of a intro into myself, just so you know who's speaking with you guys today. I guess starting with my education, I did go to school for political science. I got my degree from UNT with a minor in peace studies. I was also trained at that time and certified under the Obama administration under their FEMA certification program to develop and manage volunteers and decision making and problem solving during emergency situations. After I graduated, I immediately started at Southwest Airlines doing executive communication work for them. I have been an executive office liaison for about 4 years with them now. I have more recently become an executive board member of the East Dallas County Democrats and have been working on their communication strategy and implementing that as well. So I'm really excited to be here with you guys. My peace story, I guess, starts a little bit over a year ago. I was working at Southwest Airlines. I was about up for a promotion. I was starting to really get comfortable with what I was doing and with my job. And one day I just woke up and I didn't feel the same. I didn't feel as much energy. I couldn't quite do the work I was doing before. And slowly but surely, things just sort of got worse with my health really, really quickly. And I couldn't focus. I started working half days, got more and more sick to the point where I started actually having seizures at the office. And so that's when they decided to, my doctors pulled me out of work and I had to go through, a whole bunch of doctor's appointments and things like that at the time. It was gruesome. But the point where things really changed for me, I was sitting in a doctor's office. I had just been having seizures for weeks on end, couldn't get into specialist, and there was really no sort of relief. And a doctor looked me in the eye and told me, well, we can't tell you what's wrong, so there's nothing we can do. You just have to figure it out. Why don't you go to church and try to pray it away? And in that moment, I was like, oh my gosh, I need other options. I need somewhere to go right now. And, this isn't going to work for me. I'm damaging my body, having seizures uncontrollably. And so in that moment, I just decided, you know what, there has to be another way. There has to be another way to address these issues with our society, with our health. And so I decided to put on my thinking cap and went sort of outside of our normal medical system, found other doctors that I ended up having to pay in cash to see and to get referrals, and actually did get into a clinic in Houston where I was able to get a full diagnosis and finally get treatment and be able to work and be with you guys all here today. And so that moment for me was really important because I was able to utilize a private sector track to get the healthcare that I needed when in a single payer healthcare track, that single referral that told me there was no hope might have been my only one. And so when Pete came on the first debate stage and started talking about, I guess, not only all of the other progressive values that I hold near and dear, but then also mentioned Medicare for all who want it, I was just so thrilled to hear that. And I immediately started looking at all of his videos and started, researching him, committed to volunteer with him that same night after watching the debate. Got in touch with Michelle, got started involved with the campaign from the very early days with many of you on this call. A lot of you have been on since almost day one. So it's really great to see. And that's sort of my story here with the campaign. I started in Dallas where I live, and we've grown a huge, amazing team here. We've now got people organizing in all of the major metros in Texas. And so it's super, super exciting to see. As somebody who does have to travel back and forth between Houston and Dallas to see all these crazy doctors, I'm so excited to get to know all of you, get to see how we can connect through all of these different means of technology and all of that. So that's me, and how that sort of connects all into Pete for America is what we're going to get started on now. So Pete is all about bringing people together, and he wants to win the era by bringing together all of these like-minded individuals who want to heal and progress our country, whether their background was typically progressive or Democrat or Republican or conservative or liberal. All of those people have a place in building a better country here. And so we want to communicate in a way that always brings people together and never isolates. So our team is building communities all across the country by sharing our stories and connecting over the values and the things that we hold dear to each other and to ourselves. And so part of that is being authentic and speaking from the heart. And we aren't necessarily going to use a script. So we want you guys to be able to practice your stories and be able to have this language that follows the rules of the road, that has empathy and compassion, so that everybody feels empowered and supported to talk about their story and talk about how that fits into the campaign and spread that as well. Um, so we just want to know that whether you're at a happy hour or a family gathering, or if you're out at a community canvassing event talking to hundreds of people, talking to hundreds of people, the the framework is still going to be the same here. We want to share our story and connect over values. And you are Pete's voice, so he can't be in every living room. And so we need you guys to sort of take his voice everywhere that he can't be. And so, with that, I want to start us into the group chat with a little exercise here. We have the Discover Values mural up here that you guys can see. And so, I just want you guys to sort of pick a value that really means a lot to you and that you connect with Pete on. It doesn't have to be on this board, but just something that means a lot to you, that makes you want to be involved in this campaign. So my favorite one on here is Truman and Buddy in the middle of the P. Yeah, everybody loves first dogs. Everybody's excited for that. Ashley says articulation. I think that that's really true too. Pete has a great way of articulating such powerful messages. Thoughtful, responsible, authentic. Oh, trustworthy. I like that too. You don't hear trustworthy from a politician much, do you? That's an interesting one. Thank you, Lauren. Awesome. And so that's sort of how we want to start this conversation when we talk about Pete, is just think about your values, pick some that mean a lot to you, and start to think about those stories, those really memorable parts of your life that have made you want to commit to this campaign. And when we're talking about Pete to somebody who's on our team, who's already committed, these are some of those story starters, the questions that you can use to start a meeting, start a conversation. One of the things that we're going to talk about today is a tactic where it's basically a share your story Pete up, where you just get the people in your area together to practice sharing your story, so that when you go out canvassing, you don't have to worry about memorizing a new script or starting off fresh. You guys all have your stories ready to go. You've shared them with each other. And it can be hard to share your story sometimes, especially if it's the first time. And so it just sort of helps you get a little bit comfortable with going through that process. Because the big thing is going to be talking to the Pete curious and the non-Pete supporters. They're going to be a little bit harder to talk to. And so with these guys, we have some other questions, but they're going to be the same idea. We're going to spin it around back to our values and how these things affect our daily life as well, and ways that you see them reflected within the campaign. So, for example, if somebody is not necessarily agreeing with you and getting really in the weeds about the policies, and you don't necessarily know the policies, or you maybe sort of want to, bring the conversation back to a little lighter stage, you can sort of use that positive language, use that active listening, and say, what I really hear is that you really care about XYZ. You really care about the health of all of our citizens. Um, and I care about that too. And that's why I support Medicare for all who want it, because I want everyone to have the choice. And so you can always frame anything back to the values and the intent behind Pete's policy. And I think we all generally tend to agree on the intent. And so it's just a way for us to all remember what's important and what we're really fighting for here, and get us all back on the same team when we communicate this way. And so, yeah, that brings us to our next steps to a story. This is sort of how you're going to have this conversation. What do you value and why? So think about that over the next few days. Maybe take some notes here now. We'll throw some things in the chat here in a little bit on the next slide. And then we're going to try to describe that time in the moment. We really want to tell the story as if you're telling it and you're there right now. how does that value impact you today? So if you're telling a story from your childhood, it's just as relevant, but let's make sure we connect that and tie that back in so that people can see the connection and how that relates to Pete, and where's the time where you saw him embody that, and how it's reflected in his campaign. So we want to make sure we don't have to know every policy. We don't have to know everything he's ever done, but we can know what he stands for. And, his main points have always been freedom, security, and democracy, and everything sort of falls into that, which I've always loved. And so if you aren't sure, you can always just fall back on those three because everything fits into there. So for our next section, I want you guys to do a little bit of chatting and just sort of let's pick a question and like what was your moment? Was it the first debate? Did you know about Pete when he was throwing out his exploratory committee? Where were you? Try to be descriptive and talk about the first time you ever really sort of fell for Pete, so to speak. And if y'all want to throw that into the chat and think about it a little bit, I'm going to go over some of these tips for connecting with you guys while we do that. Okay, so if we go over these tips while y'all are thinking about your stories, so when you are sharing your story, it's really, like I said, it's emotional, it's hard. And so it's good to slow down and pause, and sometimes there's going to be silence, and that's okay. Let others share their story first. And so that way you can tailor your story and focus on what they value. One thing that I've had some success with, I'm obviously really active in politics. So when I start talking to my friends, they know I'm up to something. And so they'll ask me how I'm doing. I'm like, oh, I'm volunteering for a presidential campaign right now. And they always say, oh, thank you. We really need you to do that. Thank you so much. And then they're like, wait, who is it? And then I get to talk about Pete, and then they have questions. And so for me, that's sort of my way to, it's worked for me to let them connect first and share first, and then I can tailor what I want to share with them. What I talk about to my father who voted for Trump isn't going to be the same as what I talk about to my mother who's voted for Jill Stein in the past. So those are two very different conversations. And if we are ready and prepared to have both, we'll be that much more effective. And so use present tense, talk about who, what, where in the story, and provide validation when you're talking to people and hearing their stories. Use active listening techniques. Sort of, I hear what you're saying, and oh, it sounds like that was really hard, or it sounds like that was really important to you. I can provide a lot of acknowledgement and let people know that you are listening. And then when you reframe that back to them with a way that connected with you as well, they can really see that you are building that empathetic bridge that Pete wants to utilize to bring people together. And I know that that's really big for you guys. A lot of you talk about how unity is the biggest value for you that Pete has. And so this is sort of how we do that. This is how we connect with others and begin to build that bridge. And I just want to emphasize that this is hard. We are in a really difficult part of our country, of the history, where things have been just difficult to say the least. And we all feel that. Things are hard to talk about. And so just remember to be kind and be like Pete, and know that everybody's story is coming from a deep place in their heart as you take all of these in. Oh, we have some really good. I see the Meet the Press interview. I see CNN town halls. Oh, you guys are so awesome. I know all of these videos you're talking about. It's so great. So be sure that you also bookmark these and have them to share and ready to go. Sometimes when you're talking to somebody, you remember like, oh, I remember that one time he said this really strange thing about technology. And if you have that bookmarked, you can just pull it up and share it with your tech friends when you run into them at the bar or wherever you see them. And so next I want to show you this really awesome video to sort of segue us into relational organizing. This is Greta Carnes. She is our National Organizing Director. So Preston, if you want to press play on that.
Hi, I'm Greta Carnes. I'm the National Organizing Director here at Pete for America. I want to take a second and I want to talk to you a little bit about our organizing strategy. I started on this campaign way back in April when a lot of people did not know who Pete was. But even back then, we did know two things. The first is that we knew when people heard about Pete, they tended to really like him. And the second is that we knew that you, literally people like you, were the best messenger to talk about Pete. So we asked people like you to start having conversations about Pete. We have been building a strong ground game on the ground in Iowa, in New Hampshire, in Nevada, in South Carolina, and across the country, and we started asking people to talk about Pete with their friends, their family members, with their coworkers, with the people at their local favorite bagel shop, and it worked, and it's still working. It's working because we know that these conversations are how we win, and now we are asking you to join us. We built a website to help you track the conversations that you're having. You can check it out right now. Go to organize.peteforamerica.com. We walk you through everything. You just have to get there. And we also threw in some resources to help you have these conversations. I really can't say this enough. You, literally you, talking to the people in your life about Pete, about why you support Pete, about who Pete is, about how we know that Pete can beat Donald Trump, those are the conversations that will win us this election. We are counting on you.
Awesome. So that video is on YouTube. It's all over Facebook. So if you want to watch that again, we will share it with you guys as well. So it's really great to hear from the campaign and just to know that this is sort of what everybody's doing across the country. We're all utilizing these same tactics. So we have gotten together with other grassroots organizations, and we also have several people on the call who took the boot education course through the campaign as well. And so this is sort of the relational organization tactic that the campaign as a whole will be using. I'm really excited about this particular orientation to it, though. Democrats have been using this particular method back since the Obama years. It is fairly new. It's a different type of way to campaign. A lot of times, and in a lot of organizational structures, things sort of come from the top down, and you're sort of told what to do. And that's not necessarily what relational organization is about. We want to make sure that everybody knows that they have a voice and that amplified together, we can be concentrated to leave the world a better place and that we can make change within our communities. And so we want to make sure that we are able to build these communities that become safe nets of support, not just for this election or for this candidate or these next 4 to 8 years, but for the rest of our lifetimes, and to raise our children in and to build in and grow. We want to build long-lasting communities and connections. And so we also want to make sure that we're speaking out and giving a voice to people who are silenced by their circumstances, whether that be their inability to commute back and forth between the city where a lot of our events are happening, or whether it be a disability where we need to be more accessible to them with this technology that we're using. All of those things are things that we want to make sure we organize around and activate to make sure we're reaching every single pocket of our country. There is this moral obligation to make sure that we do that and that we organize everywhere. There's no one part of America that's better or bigger than the other. We all contribute in our own ways. I think that's really reflected in the language that Pete uses about rural communities. And I think that that's something that'll really help us win and change the hearts and minds of the people here in Texas specifically. And people are more motivated when they're asked by a family or a friend. So we can build these strong, interconnected teams by utilizing the relationships that you guys already have and making sure that you guys are comfortable working with each other, but also have the support that you need to do that effectively. And so that's sort of what the snowflake model is. And I know that everybody loves the name snowflake model. It's sort of reclaiming the snowflake from that verbiage. But it's a really exciting way to organize because everybody has a part to play. Every role is really important. But we also have to make sure that we're all interconnected and we're all working together. And so all of the arrows go both ways when it comes to communication. We have to be open, we have to accept feedback, and we also have to make sure that we're utilizing the resources and the support that's being given to us. And so that's sort of the new way to organize around technology and around these resources and around our relationships. And it's just supposed to help us empower each other, empower ourselves to be a part of building this better country. And so one of the big things about the snowflake model is that we want to build the biggest snowflake we can so that when it's time for get out the vote, which we'll talk about in a minute, we can basically have a blizzard. We want to be able to make sure that we have as many teams as we can activated around the country and around Texas and around each individual city and that you guys have the ability to get support and have your questions answered and be able to utilize this technology and all of the great resources we're rolling out. And so that's sort of the general idea behind relational organization. This is basically how we're going to have those conversations. This is sort of if all you take are these 4 C's, that's a good place to start. We're going to use those stories to connect. Then we're going to provide context, and that's going to be, how does this contribute to the world we're trying to build? How does this volunteer opportunity contribute to your life and your personal goals? One of the really cool tips I got one time is, when you ask for somebody to join your team, don't ask them for a favor. Volunteering isn't a favor. Yes, we're going to ask for your help and a lot of your help, but volunteering is an opportunity, and not just for you to help elect a really great candidate, but also to get to know other people, get to utilize other skills, get to be creative. I get to be a part of a really awesome team and try new things. And so when you're thinking about the context of what all of this means, sometimes that context is different for you than it would be for your friend or your mom or the person you're trying to recruit. One of the examples I've given previously is, if you think about a mother who's on maternity leave and maybe wants to get back into the workforce but isn't quite sure, this is a great opportunity to try it out, try things from home in a flexible environment. This is a great opportunity to make connections, make references, and get to know people if you're trying to get back into the workforce. And there's just so many other opportunities that volunteering gives you, other than just putting Pete in office. Because some people will say, well, I vote, what else do I need to do? And we'll talk about this a little bit, but we can escalate them in by giving them that context of how important this is to them. And so we can also provide that context by discussing ways within the campaign we're connecting right now, what we're doing right now, the events we're planning, and things like that. We want to value and appreciate any contribution. So outside of whatever context they have going on, if that person can only talk to 5 people and that's all that they contribute to that campaign, then we'll win this election if everybody contributes just 5 people. But if we have people who want to step up and do more, then we're going to value that as well. And so everybody has a part to play in this, whether it's, like Greta said, whether it's just spreading the word at a coffee shop or taking on a back-end organizational role as well. And so there's different contexts for each conversation that you're going to have. And that brings us to the commit portion. If you want to click on over there. Perfect. And so every time that you start telling your story, every time that somebody says, oh, hey, that's a cool Pete button, where'd you get that? Every time that you go through the context of what our team is doing and the importance of our work here, it's only going to be a successful conversation if that person commits to a specific task for Pete. So one of the things in this sort of, it's a pyramid, right? We can see how they sort of escalate and grow within the structure. The first thing we want people to do is obviously vote for Pete. Knowing his name is a great start, but the first commitment is voting for Pete. Then we can ask them to attend an event, volunteer, host an event, or become a back-end organizer and do some of the more leadership work that we have. And so all of these things are done through a one-on-one chat, so to speak. That's the great thing about relational organizing, is it's simply a conversation that can escalate somebody within the structure. So you can have one conversation that goes from, I don't know Pete's name at all, to, oh yeah, I'll vote and I'll donate and I'll volunteer. And you can get all of those commitments in one, or you can also just escalate it through each conversation and have one commitment at a time. We don't necessarily want to take more than 5 or 10 minutes from somebody the first time we're ever talking to them about Pete. And nobody necessarily wants to sit and have an hour-long conversation unless that's scheduled out of their time. So getting those small commitments and having multiple points of contact is really, really important. When we have somebody who's never voted before at all, it can take 7 points of contact to get them from being a non-voter to voting for your candidate at the ballot box. So if we go through each one of these points of contact, so to speak, and have these, like, so for example, we have canvassing, we have, seeing his name on TV, we have these individual conversations, and all of these different ways that people hear Pete's name. But if we can have even just one of those conversations for the campaign, hopefully 2, 3, 4, that's how we bring in these non-voters and these undecided voters, is simply through your conversations. So that's a great tool, is for just this one-on-one chat as a tool to empower you guys. And I want to go on to the next slide where we have some tips about getting commitment. And I want to use your creativity a little bit in the chat while I go over some of these tips with you guys. So think about, again, some examples of things that you might say to somebody, thinking about connecting with them and providing them context. We might do a few if we have time, because we're rolling through this really quickly. So what if somebody says, you're like, hey, I'm doing phone banking this weekend. Do you want to come phone bank with us? And they're like, no, I think I'll just donate. I don't really want to give any of my time. What would you say when it's get out the vote, it's a few weeks before the election, and we really, really need people to make those voter contacts right now? Think about what you would sort of say to connect with that person and to show them the context of what we're doing. So they are a Pete supporter. They have been donating, but they maybe aren't quite as activated. And maybe ask some questions. That's a good way to start too. What would you ask that person to figure out what's important to them and what's holding them back? Just get to know people, right? The things that you do in your daily conversations. So I'm going to talk about some of these other tips here while y'all think about that. Like I said, the context was if they are donating but don't want to volunteer. And so we can all talk about the urgency of the moment. I think that you guys, I've spoken to almost all of you enough that we understand how important it is to get the right candidate into office right now. For Texas specifically, I've never felt the momentum for a Democratic candidate that I feel for Pete, and I just hope that if we convey a fraction of that urgency to all of you, and then you can convey a fraction of that to all of your contacts, we are going to certainly by far flip Texas and win this election. So I'm really excited to see how you guys can get these commitments and get us started. Like I said earlier, you can link to Pete's policies online and certainly have those available. He has a great Ask Pete resource where he's answered tons of questions, and people can still submit them and get their questions answered. But if you don't know the policy, don't worry about that. Just remember to always focus on the values and what's important to you. And be patient. Don't necessarily expect an answer right now in that exact moment. Be patient, let them time to think, let them time to breathe, and allow the silence. It's hard. Nobody likes to sit in silence, and it's our instinct to just, oh, it's okay if they don't like jump on board right away and sort of fill that moment. You don't have to do that. Just let them have a moment of their time to think about how important all of this is, and then let them answer. And if they don't say yes right away, that's okay. We can ask questions, ask what their barriers are, but we can also make sure that we have something else in mind. So if you ask somebody if they want to phone bank one day, and they say, no, I can't phone bank, but I'm okay with texting. All right, well, hopefully we have a texting bank lined up, or we can at least get you information on how to get into that texting bank right away. So we can have another activity, or if they say, oh, I can, but not this weekend, let's make sure we have another time ready to give them right away so that we can keep them involved and keep the momentum going so that that conversation gets to that commitment. If they say not ever, I don't want to volunteer at all, that's still fine. They can still support us on the ballot. Or if they aren't going to do that, sometimes it is just better to cut our losses and understand that we can't win every voter, and that our time might be better spent getting more voters that are more apt to support us. So anyway, there are tons and tons of ways to make sure that we are ending our conversations by bringing people into the structure. We want everyone to feel welcome and feel bought in and empowered to be able to help us get to this goal of electing Pete. And so I know I've been talking a lot. I don't know if there's anything in the chat. It looks like we've got some big paragraphs in the chat, so that is great. I'm going to let you guys keep working on that, keep working on sort of what you would say. To me, if it were a person who were donating but was hesitant to get involved, where we are in the campaign right now, I would invite them to a Pete up. I'd say, hey, it would be really great if you could buy the first round of drinks at our next Pete up. And that way they don't have to really do any of the work they don't want to do. They can just come and hang out and have fun, have a drink. And then maybe when they see how much fun we're having as a team, that they want to get involved again next time. And so that's sort of one of the ways, one of the examples. You can also simply say, we appreciate your support for donating and we're so happy to have you, and move on depending on where we are in the campaign. And there's, like I said, many, many tactics to be able to do that. And we will go over some of those a little bit more when we get deeper into those canvassing tactics. At first, we'll probably start with just talking to Pete supporters and people on Team Pete and getting used to sharing our stories. And then we'll go to non-supporters and maybe even some Trump voters down the line as well. So you'll get lots of practice with easier conversations before we get to those hard conversations later on. But that brings us to the next little section of catapulting and what that looks like. So like I mentioned, we want to bring people in through these Pete ups, these fun watch parties, these people who maybe are supporters or Pete curious but haven't fully bought in yet. We want to bring them in through Pete ups and watch parties. Also, the share your story chats. I briefly mentioned those, but those were a really cool idea that I had never heard before from the campaign, where basically you can just get two people together. You can throw it on Mobilize and just see how many people show up and just practice sharing your story, and just talking about important moments to you in your life. Go through the rules of the road and talk about a moment of each of those. There's just really any way you can just start sharing your story over coffee, over disc golf, over any hobby that you have. You can make any event a Pete up and just talk about Pete. And that's sort of the great thing about this organization model is you can think about anything that you do in your spare time and say, can I wear a Pete shirt while I do that? And then you can make it a Pete up. So that's really awesome. And those events will be what bring in new people into our structure, show them how fun and joyful we are. And then we have these other types of meetings to sort of build our team and be effective. And so we have organizational meetings, which are different than from Pete ups. Pete ups are going to be our fun get-togethers, informal, just to get to know each other and bring in new faces. Our organizational meetings and one-on-ones and trainings are going to be very specific, have specific agendas, and be meetings. They are for planning. And so you can have an organizational meeting with two people to plan a watch party, or we're going to have organizational meetings every week with all of our volunteers across Texas. So this can be small scale or big scale. And we do have outlines from the campaign about how we want to handle those meetings and how we want to sort of make sure that we stay on track and make sure that we're being effective. And so we'll make sure that we are implementing that and sharing that as we move forward as well. But all of that's going to bring us down to the big get out the vote moments. And this is sort of the big kahuna of all of this. All of these relationships that we're building, all of these stories that we're sharing, all of the connections that you're making are so that we can get out the vote the month and the week of the election. We basically want to spread Pete's name now, and then right before the election, we want to make sure that people show up to vote. And so organizing this way, bringing people together, it brings power that leads to change through direct voter contact and also relational voter contact. A lot of times in a lot of traditional campaigning, you only get this direct voter contact where you're only talking to people through phone banking and block walking. And it's not organic. You don't necessarily, you have to honestly try harder to get people to buy in. It's a harder way to campaign. But when you do it with people that you know, that share your values, that trust you, that care what you think, it's much easier to get them bought in and build the power and change that we're trying to create. And so basically what we try to say is that if you can bring 5 people to every event, text 5 of your friends to remind them about a Pete up and remind them about a watch party. if you can share your pictures on social media and then just invite the 5 friends that like them to the next meetup, those simple things will win us the election. It doesn't have to be these big events. Those will win us the election too, and we are certainly going to continue to do that. But as you heard Greta say, what we really need to do is have these intimate conversations that focus on healing and empathy to bring us all in together. And that way we feel comfortable having these conversations with the public as a whole as we move on to the general election. And so there are a lot of tips for how to reach people during these events, like making sure we follow up with attendees individually. There are fun ways we can make sure that we're not burning people out. And we have a host packet to talk about some of that. And we will talk about a little bit more about block walking and things specific to Texas here in a little bit. But that is sort of the general overview of organizational relational organizing. And so if we want to continue to move up through that structure with the voting and the becoming a volunteer, part of that is becoming leadership and becoming an organizer yourself for the people who are up to that challenge. And so as organizers as a whole, we are responsible for creating conditions that make people feel empowered so that they can go out and be a part of the solution, so that we all feel like we're working towards the same goal and there isn't this uncertainty, that we know what we're fighting for and we are comfortable and can trust that the future that we envision is all sort of the same. And when we utilize this, when we bring people in this way, it allows people to feel more valued and more appreciated, and because it allows us to those direct relationships within your team. So you don't necessarily have a big boss coming down and telling you what to do all of the time. You have support, you have communication chains, and you have resources and tools to help you. But you guys are fully empowered to start relational phone banking today and start building your own contact list and talk to the people that you care about in your lives. And so that is this tool that we are looking at right here. And if you go to organize.peteforamerica.com, you can get started organizing right on your own. There are tools for how to have a conversation, links to get you to mobilize where we have all of our events, links to his issues, and all sorts of other resources that you have available. And if you click on the Your People section of that, that's where you can start to track and monitor your own contacts and see how they're escalating within your conversations. It'll ask you questions about how they support P on a scale of 1 to 10, where they're at, sort of walk you through the conversation of where they're at as a supporter. But my favorite thing about this is it actually doesn't ask for your friend's contact information. So you are 100% in charge of who you contact and how you manage your own network. It's not like a multi-level marketing scheme where we're trying to get you to put all of your contacts into our website. No, it's not. They don't ask for that information. So it's simply to help you organize and be able to reach out to the people that you want to talk to. When you're hosting an event or a meetup or a watch party, these are the people that you maybe want to send an invite to or maybe talk to a little bit more. And you can, yes, I was the person showing us on the screen. This is great. So yeah, you can add people, whether or not they're on the team, whether or not they have been spoken to recently, if they've committed to vote. So this is all some super awesome information. And I know that sometimes it can seem tedious to go through the rules of the road, commit to the rules of the road, and commit to vote, and all of these different links that we have. But it really helps us identify where supporters are within our structure so that we know where to put our resources. And so this information does go back into the campaign so they can see how many grassroots volunteers and conversations are happening on the ground so that they know where to send resources. And it also helps us see if those grassroots conversations are brand new or if we have a whole lot of volunteers in place or what exactly the conversations on the ground are looking like. And so this is twofold. It does help the campaign and it also helps you guys. And so if you guys want to start taking a look at that and organizing your own people, like I said, we are always going to be here for your support, and there are so many resources for you, but you're also fully empowered. And so I want to talk about some of the tools of empowerment that you guys have at your disposal, in addition to the design toolkit and everything that you see there in the grassroots tool. We also have the volunteer form, bit.ly/vol for Pete. This is really awesome because it's a really easy way to get people to commit and actually make that commitment right there. So you can say, oh, it's super easy, just fill out our form right here, and you can even pull it up on your tablet or your phone. And we try to use incognito mode if you're doing that in public on canvassing. But we have a really cool resource just to get them that commitment very quickly. We have a host packet that we're putting together. We've put it together, but we want to iron out the details and make sure that it's pretty for you guys. But it has things of how to find a location, how to get started, ways to start the conversation once you're at your PETUP, name tags, sign-in sheets with all of our disclaimers and things like that. So those are all there for you to get started hosting your events as well. And then we have our Texas Slack channels. So if you guys want to throw this link in, actually I can throw this link in there. And we can all join our Texas Slack channels so that we can stay in touch with each other and what we're all doing. We have some really, really cool things happening in Slack. So Slack is connected to our planning platform that we're using, Airtable, which hosts all of our volunteer sign-ins and all of our project management. So when somebody updates an event in our calendar for the team, it notifies us on Slack. Or when somebody posts on social media, it notifies us on Slack. So we're all in constant communication with each other, and we can make sure that we're being as efficient and effective as possible. And so I think that it's a really awesome tool, especially as we're organizing across the entire state and sometimes in different time zones and certainly in different regions. It's really, really cool to be able to help each other and get contacts all over the state. The other tools that we have are these one-on-one chats and organizational meetings that can sort of help us grow and escalate our structure. We're all here for you guys as your organizers if you ever have any questions at all. And then we're going to be rolling out other trainings. We want to be able to make sure that you guys feel comfortable to potentially do this training for yourselves to other people. And we're going to be doing trainings for some of our other teams, like our social media team and our communications team. And then we're going to be getting open VPB and minivan access for direct voter contact as well. And so those will be the resources that we use to phone bank and block walk that make sure that we are targeting potential Democratic voters, or when you're ready, targeting Trump voters and potentially conservative voters. And that when we do contact them, we have that information saved and stored, and we can put that feedback into our system of how that conversation went, so we know where to further funnel resources for future conversations. And so those resources are coming. We've got a few things in the works for Texas specifically. Part of that is filling out our team roles, which we're about to transition to, but then making sure that we have all of the legals dots crossed and I's crossed and I's dotted and T's crossed. There you go. But that brings us to our organizational structure here that we have in Texas. So if Ashley, if you want to talk a little bit about that and sort of the roles that we need to move forward.
So we just wanted to look at this organization chart. So in advance, thank you so much everyone for being patient while we get everything figured out. We're still getting marching orders from HQ, so some of this is like confidently being winged, but we again appreciate your patience with finding everybody's place in the organization. And titles will be changing, but for the most part, responsibilities are going to be the same throughout. So what we're really looking for are some people with some traits that might be unusual outside of your normal life, like being involved in coalitions or having a special talent, like being able to translate for us, any kind of social media and any kind of social media or graphic design. What would be awesome is if we had people certified in what was it, the deputy voter something?
Yes,
I
the
forgot what
volunteer
it's called.
deputy registrars. We need to start doing voter registration drives as soon as possible. The deadline to register to vote in Texas is February 3rd. So if you guys can get registered so that we can get people registered to vote, that would be great.
Yeah, and any kind of organizations that you're involved in. You guys are from Texas, you know how bad the allergies are. I'm gonna have to pass it over to you, Amanda. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. I know it's been raining here, so same things are going on with us. But yeah, we do want to fill some roles. On that previous slide, you sort of saw how we have the team captains and some roles that we want to make sure that we are able to fill, so that we can make sure that we have a point of contact so that you guys have somebody to answer your questions, someone to go to when you know that you know sort of has that inside information and that can really help you. So we're just trying to fill out some of those roles with people who best fit in them, and so that we can make sure that we're best utilizing our list of volunteers as well. We've got a list of 594 volunteers in Texas. Not all of whom have been activated to the extent that they would like to be. And so it would be really, really great if we were able to connect with these people, figure out what sort of unusual skills that they have, and bring them into our structure. Sometimes people think about traditional campaign modeling and they're like, oh, I really don't want to phone bank and block walk. So they just, they maybe detach or don't open opportunities to volunteer. But if we can tell them, no, you can pump out a graphic on your lunch break if you want to be creative, or there was a tweet on Twitter the other day of volunteers who wrote a holiday song and recorded it and shared it on social media. Any of those things that are helping spread Pete's name, whether within his circles or outside of his circles, are going to just help build our community, help build our team, and help us win this election. So we want to utilize all of the skills that we can find, no matter where we can find them. And I think that takes us, yes, to our next steps of what we're doing next. We're building our teams, like we just said. So we need all of you to share the bit.ly-vol for Pete so that we can make sure that every person is in the right spot. That form has a really great questions about not only what do you want to do, but do you want to take on a leadership role, and are there any specific communities that you want to help reach out to? So once we have all of that information, we're going to be better able to tell the size of our teams and where we can be effective. And then we'll be able to get people in touch with captains of those teams so that you can start working together and start collaborating. We do already have a graphics and social media Slack channels going, so there is some collaboration happening already, and it's really great to see people come together, and the creativity is awesome just to pull out things that you could have never even imagined. And so with that, we have our next events to bring people in, like we talked about, to get those peak curious and non-peak voters. So those are going to be our watch parties, our parades, and those outreach events. We're going to sort of let the information trickle down. I don't want to spend too much time because I know that different cities are in different stages with these events. And so we will be having our volunteer organizers call weekly. And so we will talk about these events a little bit in more detail with you guys in later weeks to come. But we do have GOTV coming up. So that includes getting everybody registered to vote and then getting out the vote pretty much after the first of the year. But certainly come February, it's going to be a lot of volunteer opportunities. So join our Slack channel. Begin organizing your network at organize.peteforamerica.com. And that is all that we have for right now. I want to make sure that we had plenty of time to answer your guys' questions, make sure that we are getting you guys linked into the same page. I know that this might be the very first call for some of you guys, so some of you may or may not have used Mobilize before registering for this call. And so Mobilize is a great resource for you to go and just look for events and find things going on. And this, like maybe you're traveling and you want to see if there's a Pete up and just grab a beer with some people in another city. It's really cool to be able to see everything that's going on. They also have text banking already going on in different cities and different states, so you can sign up to help them as well. And so, yeah, we will have our Texas organizing calls on Zoom every Tuesday from 7 to 8 p.m. We will judge the size of those calls and how much interest we have when we send out invite lists, and see if we want to send out to the full volunteer list or just organizers, or how we want to do that based on interest from you guys that we get back today. But I want to make sure that we have time to answer all of your questions. This was a really, really brief overview into what relational organization is. When we took it for a boot education, they gave us 6 hours. I've previously gone through classes that were 3 hours, and I know that they put on trainings of this that are multiple weeks. And so don't feel overwhelmed. If you don't feel like you're ready to get started, that's okay. This is simply a starting point for all of us to make sure that we understand what Pete's campaign is about, the values that he lives by, and how we're going to sort of move forward. Like I said, we're not necessarily going to have scripts when we start text banking or phone banking. We will have scripts to help you out, but the meat of that conversation is going to be the personal connections that you make with your own story. So, with all of that, I want to assure you that we will be sending out links and follow-up emails and keeping in touch with all of you guys. Join us on Slack. And I want to make sure I send it over to Preston and Ashley to see if you guys have any questions or anything we want to follow up on.
No, I think this was an awesome call. I appreciate everyone for taking the time out of their day today to come and join us. Like Amanda and Ashley both said, this is just a very, very brief, high-level overview of what relational organizing is. I also put a link for the new Texas for Pete merch site that we're putting together. That's gonna have strictly just Texas for Pete merch, phone cases, hoodies, t-shirts. I'm going to work on getting some stickers and buttons and anything that you guys want. Let me know. We can get that on there, and that way we can spread Pete's name and get his name out there and get that visibility up. But thanks again, you guys, for coming out today. I appreciate it, and I'll pass it off to Amanda and Ashley again.
Yes, so I just wanted to make sure that we're available to answer your questions. I scheduled this call for 2 hours, knowing that we probably wouldn't take that long, but also knowing that that was going to be a very high-level overview. So if we want to ever practice, like I said, the Share Your Story chats, if you ever want to give me a call and talk about ways to get involved, give Ashley a call, Preston a call. If you have, creative ideas and you're not sure what to do with them, let us know. We can try to make sure that we fit you into the structure in a way that is conducive to utilizing your skills, but also making sure that we're effective. We're not double teaming on work. We're making sure that everything is streamlined and on brand. And so there's just a lot of opportunity. We're all getting in at the very ground level of Pete's campaign in Texas. We've got a big handful of volunteers in Dallas, and we've got teams forming all over the rest of the state. And we have several events in every metro region lined up. So it's really, really great to see all of you guys here and on the call. With that, I'm going to say good luck, everyone, and feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions. We can begin to just chat with each other.